The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Chapter 7. On the 5th day, I discovered another secret of the little prince's life, once again, thanks to the sheep. Without warning, as if he'd been turning it over quietly in his mind for a long time, he suddenly said, "Do sheep eat flowers, as well as bushes? Sheep eat everything they find. Even flowers with thorns? Yes, even flowers with thorns. So, what's the point of thorns then? I didn't know. I was in the middle of trying to undo a jammed bolt in my engine. My breakdown was beginning to look serious, and as my drinking water was running out, I was beginning to fear the worst. So, what's the point of thorns then? The little prince never gave up a question once he'd asked it. I was angry with the bolt, and snapped back without thinking, "Thorns are pointless, they're just a flower's way of being spiteful." "Oh," but after a silence he said bitterly, "I don't believe you. Flowers are weak and simple. They fend for themselves as best they can. They think they're terrifying with their thorns." I didn't reply. At that moment I was thinking, if this bolt resists 1 second longer, I'll smash it to bits with a hammer. The little prince interrupted my thoughts again. "So, you think that flowers—" No, I don't think any such thing," I said the first thing that came into my head. "Can't you see I'm busy with something serious?" He stared at me, stunned. "Something serious?" He saw me, hammer in hand, my fingers black with grease, bent over what seemed to him a very ugly object. "You sound like a grown-up." That made me a bit ashamed. "But," he added pitilessly, "you get everything wrong. You get everything mixed up." He was really cross. He shook his golden hair in the wind. "I know a planet where there's a man with a bright red face. He's never smelt a flower. He's never looked at a star. He's never loved anyone. He's never done anything but sums. And all day long he says, 'Like you? I'm serious, I am. I'm a serious man,' and he swells with pride. But he's not a man, he's a mushroom." "A what?" "A mushroom." The little prince was now white with anger. "For millions of years flowers have been making thorns. And for millions of years sheep have been eating them just the same. And you don't think it's serious to try and understand why flowers take so much trouble, making useless thorns? You don't think it's serious, the war between sheep and flowers? You don't think it's as serious and important as a fat, red-faced man's sums? And suppose I know a flower, the only one in the whole world, that doesn't exist anywhere except on my planet, that a little sheep could gobble up just like that, one morning, without realizing what he was doing? You don't think that's important." He blushed, then went on, "If someone loves a flower, who's unique among all the millions and millions of stars, that's enough to make him happy when he looks at them. He can think to himself, 'My flower's out there somewhere.' But if a sheep ate the flower, for him it would be as if all the stars had suddenly gone out. And you don't think that's important?" He couldn't go on. He suddenly burst into tears. Night had come on. I'd dropped my tools. I didn't give a fig for my hammer, the bolt, hunger, or thirst. There, on my star, on my planet, on Earth, was a little prince in need of comforting. I took him in my arms. I rocked him. I said, "The flower you love isn't in danger. I'll draw a muzzle for your sheep. I'll draw a railing for your flower." I didn't really know what to say. I felt so clumsy. I didn't know how to reach him, to get back in touch with him. The land of tears is so mysterious. Chapter 8. I soon got to know this flower better. There had always been very simple flowers on the little prince's planet, decorated with a single row of petals. They took up no room and didn't get in anyone's way. They would appear among the grass in the morning and disappear by the evening. But this particular one had germinated one day from a seed, brought from heaven knows where, and the little prince had watched it closely, because it was different from any shoot he'd ever seen before. It might have been a new kind of baobab. But the seedling soon stopped growing and began preparing a flower. The little prince saw an enormous bud swelling, and realized that a marvelous apparition would soon emerge. But the flower went on, preparing her beauty in the shelter of her green chamber. Choosing her colors with care, she dressed slowly, arranging her petals one by one. She didn't want to come out all crinkled like a poppy. She wanted to appear only in the full bloom of her beauty. Ah, yes, she was a coquette. So she spent days and days getting ready. And then, one morning, exactly at daybreak, she finally came out of her hiding place. And after working so long and so carefully, do you know what she said, stifling a yawn? "Ah, I'm still half asleep, and haven't had time to do my hair." The little prince could hardly contain his admiration. "How beautiful you are." "Yes, aren't I?" said the flower, "and I was born at the same time as the sun." The little prince realized this wasn't exactly modest, but she was so exciting. "I believe it's breakfast time," she said. "I wonder if you'll be kind enough to think of me." So the little prince went off, all abashed, to fetch her a canful of fresh water. Thus you can see how soon she started making his life difficult with her stormy vanity. One day, for instance, she said to the little prince, "I'm not afraid of tigers with their claws." "There aren't any tigers on my planet," objected the little prince. "Besides, tigers don't eat grass." "I'm not grass," replied the flower sweetly. "I beg your pardon. I'm not afraid of tigers, but I can't stand drafts. Would you by any chance have a windshield?" It's hard luck for a plant not to be able to stand drafts, the little prince thought to himself. She's very complicated for a flower. I must be put under glass at night. It's very cold here. It's not at all well organized, now where I come from, but she had to stop. She had come as a seed, and couldn't know anything about other places. Embarrassed at being caught, about to tell such a silly lie, she coughed a few times to put the little prince in the wrong, and said, "So what about this windshield?" "I was going to get it, but you were still speaking." So she forced her cough even more to make him ashamed. Thus, despite his well-meaning love for her, the little prince soon came to mistrust her. He took her careless remarks seriously, and became very unhappy. "I shouldn't have listened to her," he told me one day. "One should never listen to flowers. One should look at them and smell them. Mine perfumed my whole planet, but I didn't know how to enjoy it. This story of claws, which irritated me so much, should have filled me with tenderness." And he confided in me. I understood nothing then. I should have judged her by her actions, not her words. She perfumed and lit up my life. I never should have run away. I should have guessed the tenderness behind her silly games. Flowers are so contrary, but I was too young to know how to love her. Chapter 9. I think he took advantage of migrating birds to make his escape. The morning before he left, he tidied up his planet. He carefully raked out the active volcanoes. He had 2 active volcanoes, and very useful they were for making breakfast. He also had an extinct volcano, but, as the little prince said, you never know. So he raked out the extinct volcano too, just in case. Volcanoes burn gently and regularly if they're properly raked out and don't erupt. Volcanic eruptions are like chimney fires. Obviously, on Earth, we're very much too small to rake out our volcanoes, which is why they give us so much trouble. With some sadness, the little prince also pulled out the latest crop of baobab shoots. He thought he would never return, and all these routine tasks seemed very pleasant to him that morning. And when he watered the flower for the last time, and was about to cover her again, he suddenly felt like crying. "Goodbye," he said to the flower, but she didn't reply. "Goodbye," he said again. The flower coughed, but it wasn't because of her cold. "I've been silly," she said at last. "I'm sorry. Try and be happy." He was surprised she didn't blame him. He stood there, confused, holding the glass globe. He didn't understand this calm mood of hers. "Yes, it's true. I love you," she said to him. "It's my fault. You didn't realize it. It doesn't matter. But you were as silly as me. Try and be happy. Put that globe away. I don't need it any more. But what about the wind? My cold isn't so bad, really. The cool night air will do me good. I'm a flower. But what about wild beasts? I must put up with a few caterpillars, mustn't I, if I want to see butterflies? I hear they're so beautiful. Besides, who else will come to see me? You'll be far away. As for big animals, they don't frighten me. I've got my claws," and naively she displayed her 4 thorns. Then she said, "Don't hang around like that. It's irritating. If you're going to go, go!" For she didn't want him to see her crying. She was such a proud flower. Chapter 10. He found himself in an asteroid zone. Numbers 325, numbers 326. 326. He was dressed in purple and ermine, and seated on a simple but majestic throne. "Ah, a subject!" cried the king when he saw the little prince. "How can he recognize me when he's never seen me before?" thought the little prince to himself. He didn't know that the world is very simple for kings. Everyone is a subject. "Approach, so that I might see you better," the king said to him, proud to be a king for someone. The little prince glanced round for somewhere to sit, but the whole planet was taken up with the magnificent ermine cloak. So he remained standing up, and because he was tired, he yawned. "It's contrary to etiquette to yawn in the presence of a king," the monarch said. "I forbid it." The little prince was thrown into confusion. "I can't stop myself," he said. "I've come a long way, and haven't slept." "Very well," said the king. "Then I command you to yawn." "I haven't seen anyone yawn for years. Yawns are an unusual sight for me. Come along then, yawn again, that's an order. Now, you've put me off," said the little prince, blushing, "and I can't any more." "Humph! Well then," replied the king, I command you to yawn sometimes, and sometimes to He stammered and seemed angry, for the king insisted that his authority should be respected. He wouldn't put up with disobedience, but he was good. So, although he was an absolute monarch, he only gave reasonable orders. If I were to command a general to change into a seabird, he would often say, and the general didn't obey me, it would be my fault. "May I sit down?" asked the little prince timidly. "I command you to sit down," replied the king, pulling aside a fold of his ermine cloak. But the little prince was puzzled. The planet was so tiny. What could the king reign over? "Sire," he said, "excuse my asking, but I command you to ask," the king said hurriedly. "What do you reign over, sire?" "Everything," replied the king with majestic simplicity. "Everything?" With a discreet gesture, the king indicated his planet, other planets, the stars. "Over all that?" said the little prince. "Over all that," replied the king. For he wasn't only an absolute monarch, but a universal one too. "And the stars obey you, do they?" "Of course they do," said the king, instantly. "I won't tolerate indiscipline." Such power amazed the little prince. If he had it, he'd be able to watch not just 44, but 72, or even 100, or even 200 sunsets the same day, without even having to move his chair. And as he was feeling a bit sad at the thought of his lost planet, he ventured to ask the king a favor. "I'd like to watch a sunset. Will you command the sun to set, to please me? If I were to order a general to fly from flower to flower like a butterfly, or to write a tragedy, or to change into a seabird, and the general didn't carry out the order, which of us would be in the wrong?" "You would," said the little prince briefly. "Correct." "One must only ask of people what they're capable of doing," the king went on. "Authority rests primarily in reason. If you were to command your people to go and throw themselves into the sea, there'd be a revolution. I have the right to expect obedience because my orders are reasonable." "So, what about my sunset?" said the little prince, who never gave up a question once he'd asked it. "You'll get your sunset. I shall insist on it. But I shall use my knowledge of the science of government to wait till conditions are favorable." "And when will that be?" asked the little prince. "Ahem! Well," replied the king, consulting a large calendar, "let me see. It'll be about, more or less, it'll be this evening at about 7:40, and you'll see how well obeyed I am." The little prince yawned. He was sorry he wasn't going to get his sunset, and he was already a bit bored. "There's nothing else for me to do here," he said to the king. "I'm going to leave." "Don't leave," said the king, who was so proud to have a subject. "Don't leave. I'll make you a minister. Minister of what? Of justice. But there's no one to judge. You never know," said the king. "I haven't made a tour of my realm yet." I'm very old. There's no room for a carriage, and it tires me to walk." "Oh, but I've already looked," said the prince, and he leant over to have another peek at the other side of the planet. "There's no one there either." "In that case," the king replied, "you will judge yourself. That's the hardest thing. It's very much harder to judge oneself than to judge others. If you succeed in doing it well, you'll be a truly wise man. But I can do it anywhere," said the little prince. "I don't have to live here." "Ahem," said the king. "I believe there's an old rat somewhere on my planet. I hear it at night. You can judge that. You can condemn it to death from time to time, so its life will depend on your justice. But then you pardon it each time in order to save it. There is only the one. I don't want to condemn anyone or anything to death," said the little prince, "and I'm going to leave." "No," said the king. But the little prince didn't really want to hurt the old king. So once he was ready, he said, "If your majesty would like to be obeyed promptly, you could give me a reasonable command. For example, you could command me to leave within a minute. It seems to me that conditions are favorable." As the king didn't reply, the little prince sighed, and after a moment's hesitation left. "I make you my ambassador," the king hastily called after him. He had a great air of authority. "Grown-ups really are peculiar," thought the little prince to himself during his journey. Chapter 11. On the second planet lived a swank. "Ah, good! Here's a fan coming to visit me," cried the swank, as soon as he spotted the little prince approaching. Because for swanks, other people are all fans. "Hello," said the little prince. "What a funny hat you're wearing. It's for acknowledging applause," replied the swank. "I doff it when people clap. Unfortunately, no one ever comes here." "Is that so?" said the little prince, wondering what he was talking about. "Clap your hands together," the swank advised him. The little prince clapped his hands together. The swank doffed his hat and bowed modestly. "This is more fun than visiting the king," the little prince thought to himself. And he clapped his hands together some more. The swank bowed and doffed his hat again. After 5 minutes of exercise, the little prince got bored with this game. "What do I have to do to make the hat fall off?" he asked, but the swank didn't hear. Swanks only ever hear praise. "Do you really admire me a lot?" he asked the little prince. "What does admire mean?" "Admire means recognize that I am the handsomest, best-dressed, richest, and most intelligent man on this planet. But you're alone on your planet. Admire me all the same, as a favor." "I admire you," said the little prince, shrugging his shoulders. But what could possibly interest him in that? So he left. Grown-ups really are very peculiar, he thought to himself during his journey. Chapter 12. A drinker lived on the next planet. This was a very short visit, but it plunged the little prince into a fit of depression. He found the drinker, sitting between a collection of empty bottles and a collection of full bottles. "What are you doing?" the little prince asked him. "Drinking," said the drinker lugubriously. "Why?" asked the little prince. "To forget," replied the drinker. "To forget what?" inquired the little prince, who already felt sorry for him. "To forget I'm ashamed," the drinker confessed, hanging his head. "Ashamed of what?" asked the little prince, in case he could help. "Ashamed of drinking," finished the drinker, and lapsed into silence. So the little prince left, puzzled. Grown-ups really are very, very peculiar, he thought to himself during the journey.